happen from the outside. So the lack of an open standard and the lack of reviewed implementations makes almost all DECT sets, up until the ones produced this year perhaps, very weak. And those, of course, are two of the main things we try to push industry towards: more open standards and more, perhaps, certifications amongst different hardware manufacturers to adopt more best practice security and to help each other out in finding the best way of, for instance, generating random numbers.
Okay, so this was it so far at the end of 2005. What happened after that was that DECT PCMCA cards were sold out very quickly during the Congress. There are still some very old cards available on eBay. However, they are incompatible with newer laptops, but they work fine in older laptops. There was a lot of media coverage about these insecurities in January. One very interesting thing was that Patrick McHardy, who is a Linux kernel programmer, started to implement a DECT stack for the Linux kernel. Unfortunately, he's not here at the Congress. So this is a big step for an open source implementation of DECT. So far, what was available at 25C3 was just a protocol analyzer, but definitely not a complete protocol stack for DECT. After the first dust has settled, the DECT vendors, the BSI, a lot of security companies started engaging with us, and we talked to a lot of people about DECT security. So this was all very non-public, or it was not secret, but it was non-public during 2008 and became widely known in the first months of 2009. And also the first consumer devices with improved security started to appear in January 2009, or at least at the beginning of 2009, where vendors started to fix some of the most urgent problems in DECT. There are devices which can be upgraded in firmware by the user. So there was at least one manufacturer who was very quick in pushing firmware updates to their users, and they could fix some of the problems. After 25C3, the software on DECT.org was also updated. There are two types of PCMCA cards. One is called the Type 2 card, which looks like this. But this card was sold out more or less immediately, and there is also an older version of this card, which is much thicker, much larger than this card. It has a double height. This is a Type 3 card. And this card is now also supported by the software on DECT.org, but it doesn't fit in most modern laptop computers, only in some old laptop computers. Audio quality has been improved, and I think additional support for more codecs has been added. There were two more academic publications about DECT. One of this was a diploma thesis by Alexandra Mengele. What she did, she took a lot of DECT devices, I think about 30 to 50 phones, and checked how much of this DECT security they implement. So she checked if these phones encrypt by default, if these phones authenticate by default, and which attacks on these phones work. So to have an overview over the current market of DECT and to classify DECT phones, to say, is this a very insecure phone or is this a less insecure DECT phone? Another publication was written mostly by Kai Ogata, who looked at an FPGA implementation for the DECT standard authentication algorithm. And this has been published mid-year 2009. And also what I appreciate very much is that DECT security has been added to some cryptography or IT security lessons at German universities. So in public research there was nearly nothing about DECT. There were perhaps some results on the DECT radio interface, how you can improve the radio interface, but there was nothing in universities about the security of the DECT protocol, and now DECT security is part of some IT security lessons at universities, which I really like.
It is surprising, though, how hacks always occur in bursts. This is a 20-year-old technology, and all the DECT research has now happened within a year and a half. Everything, perhaps 2 years from the very early on. We are very glad, though, that this is now taken at the universities as kind of a worst-case example of how to do security, and that students are being taught what fault bits to avoid. So hopefully the lessons learned from this will much survive the burst of hacks that just occurred over the past year.
We went on to new research, so we started looking at the Dextranic Cipher, which was not completely known to us. Who of you in the audience knows the A51 stream cipher from GSM? Who has ever looked at the internal structure of the cipher? Okay, and who of you knows what, for example, a linear feedback shift register is? Okay, that's better. So, from a patent, we learned that the Dextranic Cipher is very close to the A51 cipher from GSM. So, what you see here is a picture taken from a public patent, which shows the main structure of the Dextranic Cipher. So, the Dextranic Cipher consists of 4 linear feedback shift registers. The total length of all 4 registers is 80 bits, and these registers are irregularly clocked, at least the registers 1, 2, and 3. Register 4 is regularly clocked, which means that depending on the state of the registers 1, 2, and 3 are clocked 2 or 3 times, and register 4 is always clocked 3 times. So, for example, when the Dextranic Cipher is in use, the registers 1 and 2 could be clocked 3 times, register 3 could be clocked 2 times, and register 4 is always clocked 3 times. So we have an irregular clocking here as in the A51 cipher. We have a clocking control unit. In the A51 cipher, you have in each 1 bit per register, where you take the bits and then clock the registers with where this bits equals to the majority of these bits. So if the special bits in registers 1 and 2 in A51 are 0, and register 3 in A51 has this bit set to 1, then only registers 1 and 2 are clocked, because 0 is the majority of 0, 0, and 1. We didn't know exactly how the clocking in the DSC looked like. We had to analyze that. And for A51, we have a very simple output combiner, which means that you just take 1 bit per register and just XOR them. And this is the output of the A51 algorithm. And on DECT, you have a more sophisticated structure. You take some bits of registers 1, 2, and 3, and you put that into an S box together with the last bit of output, and this generates the next bit of output. So this is a little bit more complicated than the A51 cipher. It's so-called nonlinear output combiner, or at least you can assume that it's nonlinear. And besides that, keyloading is the same as in the A51 algorithm. So you just clock in key and IV bit per bit into the registers. So we had to get the missing parts of the Dextranic Cipher. What you see here is the firmware for a baseband processor, which is built into these cards. So these cards have special dedicated hardware instructions for using the Dextranic Cipher. They have custom logic, a custom chip, which